Happy Sunday, everybody. Today we're looking at the Atlas U25B. All right, so before we start talking about this, if you haven't seen my initial review on my Atlas GP40 and GP39, I talk about a lot of these engines, and this is one of them that I brought up talking about how much I really enjoyed it. And I've held off reviewing it because of all of the issues I've had with my other Atlas engines, so I wanted to try and test this in a multitude of scenarios. And I have, and I think I've finally come to a conclusion on this. But let's talk a little bit about this before we zoom in and start looking at the body detail. UB25s are something that I wanted for quite some time, because when I think about the old industrial age diesel engines, this is one of those engines, this or, you know, the B or the C variants, you know, the U25s, the U27s, 28s. They just have this squared up body, you know, everything is for a purpose, nothing is fancy, everything is just built to be tough and rugged, and there's just something beautiful about that to me. I really like these types of engines, and they just scream nostalgia for me. So when I was putting together my steam engines for my Great Northern executive train, I ended up finding that Kato, and it was a cool engine, and I thought, cool, that works for one of them, but I wanted something a little bit different for the other, and I came across these Atlas U25Bs. And I was a little hesitant at first when I bought this because of some of the other issues that I've had with Atlas, but when I had initially been looking for this particular unit is a newer release. Like, they just put these out a new run, so I was hoping they would have an updated motor and whatnot. So that's a little bit of the history of how I got to this engine. I have mentioned quite a bit that I am pretty skeptical with Atlas engines, and this was part of me coming to those conclusions, and me also coming to the conclusion that I wanted to maybe test some new ones that came out in the future, which is, this is kind of the stepping stone between, this is the Sasquatch, the missing link between the old engines and some of the new ones that I'm starting to test now. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and zoom in and take a look at this thing and go over some of the stuff that I really like about it. Something about Atlas that I do really appreciate, and I do give them credit every time I can, is should there be safety paint on the steps, it's there. The painted handrails, it's all factory, it's easy. You don't have to worry about doing it yourself. As a guy that has shaky hands, having that done for me is a nice little added bonus. I can do it, and I don't mind doing it, but it sure is nice when it's already done for me. Up front, there is the AccuMate coupler that comes with all Atlas engines. This particular one has been pretty darn good. Honestly, I usually have a lot more problems with my my Atlas engines and their stupid couplers, but any engine that I just had to keep, like the GP39-2 back here, I generally do a microtrains conversion on. Drink if you're playing the game, but this one I have not actually felt the need to, nor have I had to take the hoses off. A lot of times these AccuMates, the hoses fall off or they hang too low and get caught on stuff. This particular engine has been darn good with that, so I do really appreciate that. Some of the added detail up front, like the brake wheel is nicely installed and looks really good. The walkways have a crosshatch feature. I've seen better on some newer locomotives, but honestly, for this probably being a remold of some older engines, they do look pretty nice and crisp. The paint detail around the windows tends to be pretty good. Must be done by hand. And the decal work, say the Great Northern there on the side, looks really nice, and it fits the engine pretty well. One downside is in low light scenarios, you will see that you get a lot of cab glow. I can certainly go in and do some of the tape work that I've done on some of my other models. I believe I put a empty wall at Wednesday out there for my GP30 that I did a while ago. I could certainly do that on this. I just, it usually runs in consist with a steam engine, so most of the time the light's not running, so I haven't felt the need to do so. However, cab lights seem to be pretty bright. The number boards are pretty bright, so that's cool. I just wish they would fix the cab system on this. Don't mind the horn. It's separately applied. One of the downsides to having a layout like mine, where I am pretty regularly changing engines on and off the layout, is small features like the horn tend to get broken. This is one of those situations, so not the fault of Atlas. They actually have pretty good, strong horns on their units. It's just a product of these things going in and out of their packaging on a regular basis. The wheel sets on this are just like normal Atlas. However, the plastic coverings that make up the trucks, I think, are a little better in detail than the normal GP engines. So personally, I really like the way these look. I think they got them spot on. You add a little bit of road grime and whatnot to these things, and they will look very, very nice. The spring detail, I don't know if you can see it down there, is pretty crisp, and you can see some of the brake hoses and stuff like that. So, or the brake canisters, excuse me. Nicely put together, and I do really like that. Compared to some of the other Atlases, these have relatively strong handrails. They're nice and well attached. That is a plus. I'm glad that they're finally fixing some of that stuff. The body detail is pretty crisp across the entirety of the long hood. Doors look pretty decent. A little shallower than I would like to see. I would prefer a little more depth in those doors just to get a little more detail from a distance. But the other thing you might notice is if you get up close, the orange tends to be a little thin in those cracks. You can kind of see some of the primer or the brown below it, but not the biggest problem, but that is a thing on this particular paint job. The radiator grills in the rear are a little shallow, but for the most part, they tend to stand out pretty well and do look nice. There are some places where you can see towards the front where the mold was a little bit wonky there. And then the back, just like the front, is pretty well put together, painted handrails, whatnot there. So not much more to say about how it looks. I generally am pretty pleased with it, and so far so good, Atlas. The time period in which these came out is a little bit confusing to me on how the DCC system was going. I was kind of under the assumption that all the newer releases from Atlas were moving to the version 2 DCC ready frame. This particular one was, I believe, was released last year sometime, and it is still the version 1 DCC frame. So not sound ready, and it still uses the clamp style decoder. This one, I believe I have a Digitrax in. It works as it should. It tends to run a little bit louder than some of my other newer Atlases, but acceptably quiet. And honestly, it has really good slow motor control. If I kick this into gear, it tends to work pretty darn good. I don't run any acceleration or deceleration with this unit. mainly because I don't want it fighting with my steam engines. So I just I have it speed matched to the, I want to say, the Heavy Mikado, and I let all of the acceleration, deceleration happen within the steam engine. That way I don't have them fighting or interacting with one another. So this could be smoothed out substantially with a little bit of acceleration, deceleration in your CV3 and 4. I have messed with it. It does function properly, but the particular use case that I'm using this for just doesn't call for it. So don't let the tad bit of jerkiness there give you any sort of bad feelings about this. It absolutely can run much slower than that and have really slow, fine motor speed. The one thing about this electrically, I was assuming, again, that this was a version 2 or something similar to that when I got it. This still does not have the wired pickups going from the trucks to the frame. This still uses wipers from the frame to the trucks. They generally are relatively reliable on this unit. I will say, though, that it does require pretty regular, and when I say regular, very fine coatings of conductor lube. It will get about 20 hours of runtime, and it will start to get spotty. A small micro brush with a little bit of conductor lube on it, and you just wipe the surfaces of the pickups to the trucks. And if you feel the need, you can go between the wheel sets and the pickups in the trucks. I don't generally find that I need that as often, but I do believe that it is my my layout that causes a little more of the oxidation on these types of pickups. I've talked about it in the past. My track seems to get dirty pretty fast. The pickups on Atlases tend to be that way as well. I don't see this problem as much with Kato. It's probably a difference in the alloy they use, but a quick wipe down and a little bit of conductor lube between those two, and the thing's back to functioning pretty reliably in most cases for a good period of time. 20 hours is a lot of runtime for a normal person, but I do still have some issues with this moving through turnouts. I am finding some newer models that don't necessarily have the issue. I would not call this a switcher engine, unfortunately. I'm sure that some of it has to do with the actual physicality of the distance between the wheel sets and the length of the turnouts. The thing seems to be pretty darn reliable in all other cases, except moving through my Kato turnouts. And again, I will bring up that I don't separately power my frogs or anything like that. It's just however those Kato turnouts came from the factory. When I put my layout together, I was in a much different understanding of DCC than I am now. And so they're factory set up. Now, I do believe that they do power the frogs from the factory, but I'm not 100% sure. But there kind of seems to always be, there's a particular spot in a lot of my turnouts where moving at slow speed, if you don't kind of get over that little tiny gap, you will end up in a shutdown position. And this engine definitely suffers from that. Most of my larger engines don't have any troubles with them because I think the distance between the wheel sets is just enough that no matter what you do, no matter how fast you go, you're always somewhere where there's good electrical pickup. And before anyone says you just don't have a properly powered layout, I disagree with you 100%. I took a lot of time and I really went through and double-checked my wiring recently because of some DCC problems that I've been running into. But my area where I do switching, my yard, is very electrically sound. It has probably more jumpers than is necessary. At each of the ends of my runs, there is power at every end of a turnout. So there's a Y. All three positions on those Y have power being fed into them. So, and I went through and I checked every one of them while I was double checking my wiring on my layout because of my dying decoder problem. And so I know for a fact now that I have electricity everywhere it needs to be. I have DCC everywhere it needs to be. And honestly, my track is pretty clean at this point because I went through and cleaned everything looking for possible something causing a short. So I definitely have an issue with this being a switcher engine. It should be, and I don't know if there's any way to get around it with these older Atlas engines. I just have had zero luck with them being good switcher engines. I will preface that in saying I have a couple new ones that are changing my opinion a little bit, but these old wiper style Atlases I just can't recommend for that particular thing. Now, as a secondary engine or a lead engine in a consist on the main where you're not doing a lot of in and out of turnouts, the thing does work pretty darn good. It runs pretty quiet and it is relatively smooth. The other thing about this is while running DCC, or excuse me, a Digitrax on DCC, I used to have issues with a lot of my engines speeding down a hill. This particular engine, as well as my Dash 8s that kind of have the same wheelbase as this, they're running NCE, this is running Digitrax. None of them have the issue where they tend to speed down a hill. They tend to hold their speed pretty good either direction. So I know I blamed a lot of that in my Katos on not having back EMF, but I do not have that problem with these Atlases. So however their motor is designed in that perspective, it does tend to work pretty darn well. This is a relatively light engine for what it is. It doesn't have a huge amount of pulling power. Compared to the GP behind it, it pulls a little bit less. I would have thought it would have been similar. However, that might actually be a product of this now having back EMF and this not. After the new year, I actually plan on putting my my experience to the test a little bit. I have a plan to put together a pulling test type situation, so look forward to that series. I'm working on getting a standardized way of doing that, but in most of my testing, I just found that this does not pull as hard as some of my other GPs, which is this size type engine. So when it comes to the electronics, it tends to be a so-so. It's a really good mainline runner, but unfortunately, it is not a switcher, even though it's that type of sized engine. So let's talk price point and what I feel who this engine is for. I purchased this engine in a little bit different time. Honestly, it has come down in price substantially from when I picked it up. I find these pretty regularly on eBay, as well as some of the train sites in various different road name, road number, that type of thing. And they tend to run right about the $105 range. And for an Atlas, that seems to be a pretty good price point. They tend to run just a little bit more expensive in some things. However, some of the new ones are really changing that. They're being pretty aggressive with their price point on some of these new ones. So you can buy this DCC equipped. I see them anywhere from $150 to $160 in some places. I wouldn't pay the premium on that. These are relatively simple to put a decoder in. You just loosen the screw on each end of the body when you pull the cover off here. Slot open the frame a little bit or take it fully apart if you wanted to. Slap the decoder in there and it tends to work pretty good. So not rocket science by any means, so I would definitely purchase these DC equipped and then do the conversion yourself. Save yourself some money. You're paying quite the premium for that installed decoder. So that begs the question, compared to a Kato, you're not going to find a Kato that looks like this with this many features. The older Katos are of a different quality and don't hold up to the looks and runnability that this thing does. So you can't really compare it to the Katos, although the new road engines, SD70s, ES44 ACs, all that from Kato will definitely outperform this in most respects. They're a different class than what this engine's in. So comparing it to other modern engines, I can't recommend it either. It is one of the better version 1 DCC ready Atlases you can find. However, the new version 2 engines, especially some of the more recent ones that I'm picking up, have a better price point, have more capabilities, and tend to work a little bit better. And I'm prefacing this, I'm still testing a lot of them, but a lot of them are coming in at the $170 price point with lock sound installed. And the DC versions are down in the $95 range. So knowing that these newer units are just running so much better, and I'm not going to say the reliability is better, but they do run better. They have better slow speed control. They're quieter. The number of decoders that are available to put in them are substantially higher. They're cheaper decoders for the same usability. Honestly, I really hope that Atlas comes out with these as a version 2 here before too long, do a re-release, because the body does really look good on these. They are gorgeous looking. I just love the way these engines look. I think they do such a good job. If they did the version 2 frame with this, put a nice light hood on it, this could be one of the nicer engines that Atlas produce, and something that nobody else really makes. And it would really serve a lot of purposes for me. And I think if you got a couple Pennsylvania versions of these on your layout, because they really do, they bring out that real industrial look. I love the way those things look. I want several more of these so bad. I'm going to tell everybody to wait for the version 2 of this to come out, especially if you can put sound on this for that $170 range. If you bought this now for $105, put in a good Digitrax decoder. They're roughly $40, $45 for something that would go in this. You're at $145, $150. You might as well just wait, save that $20, and get one of these pre-installed with lock sound when it comes out. I got a GP that I just put on my layout that came from Atlas that has lock sound installed, $170 shipped, and it's been so good so far. So if they can put what is in that engine in this engine, you got a winning deal. But for the time being, unless you really are comfortable maybe doing some upgrades or something, possibly wiring your own pickups in so that they're a little more reliable, I would just say to pass on this one until the next ones come out. But almost there, Atlas. Honestly, I really do enjoy this engine. It's been so much fun for me, but the newer offerings you guys are putting out there are showing me that you can do so much better. So please come out with these in version 2. I think they're going to be a really awesome addition to anyone's layout when you do. All right, everybody, thanks for stopping by. A little bit different review than normal. This one kind of had some history, so I wanted to get it out of the way as we move forward with some of the newer Atlases and my re-reviews of my GP40 and GP39 when I get some more time on them. So thanks for stopping by. I will see you next week. Have a good rest of your weekend. Bye now.